Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to America, Some Assembly Required. Anna Maria Reitzinger is ill today, unfortunately. She has a schoolhouse flu given to her by one of her staffers' children. And so she's resting, and I hope to have her take and rejoin us next week. And we will continue on with our justice, our investigation of the justice position. And I think it's really important that Anna be with us because there's a lot in due process with our justices that I know many of the assemblies need to hear and comprehend how our actual court system works different from the judges of the de facto court system. So, I'm going to reserve that until next week. So today, what I decided to do was we've covered a lot of material in the last 18 weeks on the General Assembly and its committees and positions, and also on the Jural Assembly and its committees. And so I would like to take questions today and be able to answer your questions with regards to some of the things that are going on. I don't know that I can answer all of them, but I will certainly do my best to try to answer your questions, and today is the day to ask them. So please try to stick to the General Assembly and the Jural Assembly. I'll do my best to answer as we go along. And when we're done answering questions, then we'll be done with our podcast today. So the real show is really up to you today. So I'll be happy to start taking those questions. So get them in the chat and get them in all caps so I can see them as you go along. Okay. So I see, I also have an announcement from Anna, and then I'm going to run during this show. Anna is desperately requesting donations. So they are running really low, and they've got a lot of things that are cooking right now with the banks and with all of the legalities and everything else. So she's asking, even if you only have a couple dollars, my couple of dollars, your couple of dollars, they all add up to assisting. So in the bottom of the screen is scrolling where you can donate. You can donate through Cash App, and hers is $Anna Rise, REIZE, on Cash App. You just have to download that app, follow the instructions, and then it's real easy to send Anna donations through that, straight through from basically your bank account through to Anna's Cash App. The other way is to donate, send her a postal money order or a check through Post Office Box 520994, Big Lake, Alaska 99652. And I'll report this throughout, I'll repeat this throughout the podcast today. But I'm asking you to try to dig in, even if it's just a little bit, send her a little bit, so we can get to the goals that we are all desiring to have happen. So thank you. And Anna thanks you very much. Okay. And again, it's just a simple schoolhouse flu. It'll probably be, 24, 48 hours, and she'll be, getting over then the sniffles and the congestion that goes with it. So it is, it will be no time at all before she'll be back up on her feet. There is a PayPal, but I'm not sure exactly what that PayPal account is. I know she's had trouble with PayPal in the past. So, I'm not sure what her PayPal donation link is. You can always look on the tasa.americanstatenationals.org website to see various ways to donate to Anna. And PayPal may be one of them still. Okay. So, I'm going to show wait a minute, just a minute. I'm going to come back up here and get the first question that I have in the chat. And it's not that one. Okay. what direction do you have regarding the coroner position? So our coroners, you have to have a coroner in order to open your courts. It's required. Okay. It's an extremely important position. And so the coroner is going to start because we have to build our structures from our state downward. We have to normalize our processes on the state in order to pass those down and have the same kind of operational stance, sort of, to our counties. Doesn't mean that it has to be exactly the same, but it does need to be fairly similar between our state and our county assemblies. So the coroner position, again, is a really important position. And it happens both at the state level and eventually in each of our county jural assemblies as well. Has to be existing. And eventually the state coroner really works on like capital crimes and those types of things, and assists the county coroners. But just so you know that the coroner, for the time being, can act as sheriff on any county that would invite them in. It has to be an invitation by the people on the county, but the county coroner can act as the sheriff on a county for any county that has not yet elected their publicly elected sheriff. So that's one of the duties for a coroner. The coroner main responsibility is the recording, the determination and recording of life and death on our states. So the coroner's office at the state level is going to be basically keeping a record just in his office of the deaths and the life. He'll keep the death certificates. He'll be giving those death certificates over to a recording secretary who will then record that death record onto someone's land recording account. Likewise, the coroner takes care of birth, and he's going to issue eventually a live birth record and maintain a live birth record of all the people in our assemblies and on our states. So his office operates in both ways. And I know that in the past, the Jural Assembly Handbook states that the coroner has to have a physician. He must be a physician or a medical professional. However, you know, one of the things that in Ohio's research, we found that in the past, before, and you have to remember that Rockefeller medicine didn't come in till the late 1800s and 1900s, that the coroner position was actually could have been also the local physician, and that physician knowledge was passed on from physician to physician. Sometimes it was the mayor, sometimes it was the sheriff, and sometimes it was one of the local morticians. And sometimes it was the furniture maker who made the caskets, who also acted as the mortician for that particular local jurisdiction. So the coroner has to have just the ability to really determine life and death. But the coroner also needs to be able to keep the records of those lives and those deaths. And he has to be able to determine what that life or that death is. He has to be able to determine if it was a natural death, or if there was some mitigating circumstance or foul play involved in the death. And so a lot of our coroners only have the responsibility to do that. And if there's needed additional types of information that goes with our coroner position, let's say they have a suspicious death, but they're not really sure what that death is, but they just have an inkling. They can call for a medical and contract a medical examiner or a mortician to perform a full-blown autopsy and evaluation. So we have the ability to handle those types of incidences on our assemblies in that way by contract as well. So as you're thinking about coroner, and a lot of people, they don't want to think about, handling the death, but it's really a point of dignity for our people to make sure that they are, that their death is handled in an appropriate way and investigated in appropriate methods. But also, Anna has said many times that we don't have a probate court. And one of the jobs of the coroner in the past was always to make sure that the assets of the dead were distributed according to the deceased's will. So they would be one of the people that would do basically the reading of the will, or would be there to authenticate the reading of the will and the distribution of property. So they would call in like the sheriff to guard the personal property, and or local militia to guard the personal property until the reading of the will and the disposition of the assets of the will, which is why it's really important for each of us to have a will and to have that published. We can do that privately. Most people choose to do that privately and only have that released at the time of their death. So that would be something that once the death is reported, then the recording secretary would get in contact with whoever is part of, they would get in contact with the coroner and the sheriff, and then they would get in contact with the family members to dispose the assets of the will. And that's one of the reasons why we have never had probate courts in our country. That always went through. Probate court is a very English court position. And so that is why probate, and if there's any contesting of the will, then that has to go back through our living court. And then the assets are held until the judgment of the jury trial, the trial by jury. And the jurors make that decision. So it's why we need to be really very exact in our wills, so that we don't have areas that are very vague in our wills. Okay, I hope that answers the question. If not, put another question in the chat and we'll work on that one. Okay. So can you clarify exactly what exactly is entailed for the banking committee? What are their duties? So that's Michelle from New Hampshire. So the banking committee is going to be helping to make and formulate plans. So some of the things that you need to be thinking about, Michelle, is because this is an area of essentially unincorporated business for us. And you're going to have to treat that banking committee and what plans they're making for banking like a business plan. You're going to be looking at, first of all, some of the considerations have to be, where are your concentrations of your population? How can you best serve your population in your state? And so, for example, in Ohio, we have a pretty big state. It is 6 to 7 hours from one bottom corner of our state to the other corner of our state. If you go from the west to the east, north to south, that way. But if you look at Ohio like the 5 on a die, eventually Ohio we will start building our banks out in that way, because we have a population concentration right now in our southwest corner and in our northeast corner. And we're going to want to serve both that southwest and northeast. But when we divide the state up from any one of those 5 points on our state, it's about 2 hours in any direction then to get to and do business in the bank. Now, eventually that will happen as the bank builds out and our population builds out even more. Then we'll be able to expand that and shorten those time frames into like an hour drive or a half-hour drive, or however that population grows. But to begin with our banking committee, we have to look at where our people are and where best locations would be for access to our banks in those populations. And then we have to think about where our people are who are going to take care of that, where our main bankers are located. And we don't want that to be more than, say, 45 minutes to an hour at the most for them to commute to and from those banking positions. We don't want to burden our people with what the de facto burdens us with in terms of travel for our banks. So we have to be cognizant of where our people are. And for example, in Ohio, in the southwest corner, we have 2 recording secretaries, one of our main bankers, our coroner, and the records keeper and chairman, which is me. And so that would make our first location into the dive of banking most logical to put, say, in our southwest corner. And then we have to look at, okay, if we get the opportunity to have a second banking location, where do we put it in the northeast corner, and who do we have there? Well, I know that I've got a recording secretary. I've got one of my main IT people for IT servers and those kinds of things that can locate there. And I've got another banker up in that area. So it makes sense then to expand that business into that area as well and service the people, our dense population in that northeast corner, and try to make it as accessible as we can. Fortunately, on Ohio, our highway system is set up where we have a very easily accessible grid across the state. So you're looking at all of those factors and starting to make those plans. So you're going to go out and start looking at banking buildings. As Anna said, the ideal banking building is, to begin with, is going to help service the business of your assembly entirely. But you also don't want your people having to have all those people walk through your bank. So ideally, as she said, they would have different doors to where you might go to a recording secretary, or go to a land patent office, or go to the record, to your coroner's office, or something like that, so that you can secure your bank. And one of the things we have to realize is that eventually our banks will be having gold and silver. So we have to have a vault, we have to have security, and we have to have good security protocols for our bank. And that's what the banking committee kind of deals with, is all of those aspects of the business of banking, plus looking at how do we best serve our assembly communities in the entire functions. Maybe that's a meeting room. Maybe that's also serves as a courtroom. Maybe it serves, there's just a large part of it to begin to get your heads wrapped around and start to wrap around the physical aspects and demographics of our banking. But then also realize that our banking committee has to put in some fiduciary policy. We have to make sure that what we're doing are always the right things for the banking business. And so we're going to be faced with, how do we pay our people? What's going to be our policy for doing that? Now, that might be included in our training. We don't know yet from Global Family. We're still waiting for those instructions and for the training. And so all you can do right now is research and start planning, looking at your demographics, looking at your people, getting people to be involved. And you want people who have some banking business. Maybe they've been a teller. Maybe they're in financial services. Maybe they've actually run a bank or a credit union, or been involved in banking services of some sort. So you're looking for that talent, and we're looking for people to raise their hand and make themselves available to assist us in those planning periods. So right now, while we don't have funding, it can be a little frustrating. We have a lot of questions, but now's the time to start to form those plans, get a tentative business plan together for it, and get all of your questions that you're going to need to ask for your training together as you go forward. Okay. All right. So All right. I got a question from Chris Lewis. I'm frustrated with the family courts. Why isn't there any Article 3 judges to be by? So, Chris, I'm not sure, what state you're on. And, but, Anna's been hollering, she's been pushing, she's been shoving for our assemblies to get assembled. And part of that is getting your courts on your state up. The United States of America is not going to be a help in all of this. There is an Article 3 court evidently somewhere in Washington, D.C. It is 50,000 cases behind and dragging its feet every step of the way. And so we're not going to get relief there. We're not going to find relief there. They don't want to give us that kind of relief within our court systems. And unfortunately, that's the only way in their system that they're going to have to take and adhere the issues of living men and women. So it's really up to each one of us to get our jural assemblies and our court system up. I've been around now. I've got states number 30 and 31 on the books to talk to. If your state has not had an in-depth talk about how to get your assembly and your jural assemblies up and working, then, I would say you need to be in your state assembly pushing to get those things done. And of course, it's not up to them, it's up to you. We have to raise our hands and be willing to roll up our sleeves and do the work. As Anna would say, mow our own lawn. Because if we're waiting for somebody else to do it for us, it's never going to happen. We have to be the ones to save ourselves. And as I have a friend who always says on our assembly, we are the ones that we're waiting for. So my question back to you would be, what are you waiting for? And what are you doing for your assembly to get your jural assembly up? Because you can always take and move those issues by order of your courts. Once you get them up and you've got your assembly standing, you can move those things, those issues into your courts and have your courts and your trial by a jury of your peers. Okay, so you've got work to do, and you've got to get your assembly up and working, and that's going to take you and all of your assembly to do. Okay, all right. How can we best prepare to be seated in terms of documentation that needs to be submitted for General Assembly and Jural Assembly? What have you learned? Well, Leanne, I don't know that we got it perfectly correct, but Ohio made a great stab at it. And, I know that you're on Texas. Texas has the documents that Ohio used to gain their standing and seat in the seatment process with the federation. And what we have to realize is it's more than General Assembly and Jural Assembly. You have to have your militia. You've got to have your International Business Assembly. And, and you can go through and review those documents. Texas has had the extended talk. And if you're rejecting how we do it, you're going to have to come up with a better way for you to do it. And so it's all there. All you have to do is access it and be willing to work on it. And I'm not a fan of starting and rebuilding things from the ground up. If you already have a wheel that's able to turn, why would you not explore that and use that to your advantage? Make it Texas, make it yours, but you've already got a blueprint for it. So I would advise that maybe you go ahead and start really reviewing that in an open mind, in an open spirit, and get the work done. Get your committees working on it. Okay. All right. Carly Cash. Washington wonders if other states have arrived at a naming convention for court case documents. So I don't know that it's important that we have synonymous definitions. I think it's what makes sense to you and your court. You know, it could be something for each section where you have a, either arbitration or in impartial review committee. You could name that an A-101 or an A- name of the document, its initials, and a 01. It's really going to be up to each state to do that. And there's not going to be one consistent form of naming documents as you go through. So, I would say, put your hats on, look at the name of your documents, look at the phases that they're in, and maybe think about the naming convention in that way. Or you can name them, there are some courts that just name them 1, 2, 3, or 102, 100, 103, 104, whatever that is. That's up to your state. And that's where each state and each state Jural Assembly has their state rights for naming their documents. Okay. Okay. Nancy Brainerd says Cash App is unable to receive at this time. Well, they'll have to clear that back, whatever that log. Hopefully there's a lot of people who are starting to donate, which is, they only can receive so many donations at a time. It kind of overwhelms their system, and the Federation has to go in and clear that. So, I would say either try back later tonight or tomorrow, or, get your donations in the mail, maybe a money order, maybe a postal money order, or, a check that can be cashed, and or go investigate at PayPal and see if you can try a different payment method. Okay. Oh, thank you. I see a comment that says that PayPal is via Paul Stramer. So paulstramer.net. Okay. All right. Okay. Regarding status declaration, website instructions require birth certificate. Is that true? Do we need to submit such with other docs? So depending on each state has a little bit of a different process. I would say that you need to contact your state assembly and have them get you with a recording secretary to see what their process is. I can tell you that on Ohio, we only require a copy or a picture of your birth certificate. And then we take and print that off for your file. And what we're looking at for that birth certificate is to see where you were born or what state you were born on. If you were adopted, what your birth certificates are and what those adoption papers say about that, and or if you've been immigrated, what country you came for, where you were, what state you were immigrated on, which essentially becomes a new birth certificate for you, as well as we're authenticating your nationality that way. That way, when you say, I'm a Missourian, or I'm an Iowan, or I'm an Ohioan, in your nationality, we have your birth certificate to be able to back up that claim of your nationality. So all we need is a copy. We do not require an original birth certificate. No one should have your original birth certificate but you. So, and if you send an original birth certificate by mistake, you should receive back that original birth certificate from the recording secretary. They do not keep original birth certificates. Okay. All right. All right. Quorum or majority. When would you use it? How is it defined? Majority for murder cases, 2/3. No. All of our courts, all of our juries, they are all have to be unanimous decision. It is a unanimous vote of your juries, whether that's the living court jural trial, or it is a criminal court trial by jury, or a grand jury. It must be unanimous. If it is not unanimous, then the case is dismissed. Now, that doesn't mean that it's acquitted. So if additional evidence comes back up, that case could come back into court if you have a deadlocked jury. But there is no majority. It is unanimous in its decisions. So you have to really work towards being able to debate, define, know your law, and realize that, we run our case, our courts and our juries not by sentiment. It is done by facts, evidence, and testimony. The de facto runs their court by sentiment. They try to tug on the heartstrings of a jury to get the decision that they want. We don't do that. Ours is done strictly by fact, evidence, and testimony. Okay? So when you're making your claims, you have to be very clear, and you have to bring the evidence that proves your case, without a shadow of a doubt. And if you're being called into court, you need to make sure you have your evidence within a shadow of a doubt to present to basically defend yourself. So again, juries are absolutely unanimous. Otherwise, it gets kicked out. It can get put back in. But when it's unanimous acquittal, it's a unanimous acquittal, and the double jeopardy standard is in place, meaning that case cannot be retried. Okay, the decision of the jury is final. There's no appeal. There's no second chances. So when you go in, you've got to go what we call loaded for bear, and you have to be able to prove or disprove any allegation made against you by facts, evidence, and witness testimony. Okay? All right. So I know someone mentioned a roster is available for the Ohio Assembly, but I did not hear where it is available. To find available positions is the roster on a website. So on the Ohio Assembly, at the end of all of our General Assembly agendas, Joe, is where our roster of officials and officers is located. So you'll be getting one of those this weekend, and then you'll have that roster and some of the email for all the key positions. And then you'll also know exactly what the committees do, as well as know who is on all of those committees, because that information is at the end of the agenda as well. Okay. Okay. Leanne Vitalis asks, what should the jury foreman be called? So I've seen foreman, chair, lead, and principal from our various states. Does it matter under common law, or can we choose? Well, obviously your state has the ability to do what your state decides to do. What Ohio decided to do was look at Bouvier's. We looked at the Bouvier's Dictionary, 1856, 6th edition. And the Bouvier's Dictionary, 1856, 6th edition, says that it's foreman. And so, we went through foreman and principal. We decided in our Jural Assembly, with a unanimous vote of the Jural Assembly, that it was going to be foreman. And so that's what we went with. So you're going to have that debate on the Jural assembly and decide as an assembly what you're going to call it and why. And, I would suggest that you look up those definitions and decide why you want those definitions or why not you might want those definitions, and make sure that you have a dictionary available so that you can look up not only what Bouvier's has to say about those terms, but what, as you look at a Black's Law Dictionary, what Black's Law Dictionary has to say about those terms, because Black's Law is legal dictionary and Bouvier's is lawful dictionary. And so you want to make sure that you're getting something in terms of lawful terms, and or you're going to have to highly define it within your Jural Assembly handbooks, okay, or your jury handbook that you're going to produce. So that's something that you're going to have to decide on your state. All right. Can you describe the naming convention Ohio or other states used for court records? Our state Jural committee is currently deliberating this issue. So what we looked at first, as Todd, is what phase. And if it was a general document, then it was just kind of given a number and a name of a document. But if it was designated for a particular phase in our process, like impartial review, it might start with, which impartial review in our Jural assembly is the word is arbitration for others. So it may start with IRC, and then it has a whatever number or lettering that describes that particular document. So if it's an IRC and it's an invitation, it could be an IRC IV, and that could be an invitation to a claimant. So it could be an IRC IV-C, or it could be to the accused. So it would be an IRC IV-A. So that's what you've got to, that's what you're going to have to decide within your assemblies. Nobody can really determine that for you. And it's not going to be the same across the states. Okay. All right. Todd on Washington. Lisa, please share any situational evidence of what you are experiencing in Ohio now that you're seated. What are the interactions with the de facto like? How are they improving? Well, Todd, we have seen that there is, it really depends on what county. We have 88 counties on Ohio. Some of them are more tuned in and more collaborative with our assembly, and some are still resisting. There is a hotbed in our northeast part of our state, and you'd have to understand that politics and demographic that exists there. They're very entrenched, and it is the seat of a lot of the power in Ohio. Many of our ex-congressmen and senators are from up in that area, and it is also probably the seat of more of the corruption in Ohio as well. Not to say that there aren't other counties that have corruption in Ohio. So we have mixed experience there. We're getting ready to really start pushing that in that area with Jural. But one of the things that we saw, that once once we did our public elections, and we elected our full slate of office in that public election in May, and we seated everyone then on July 4th, 2024, in publicly, and made the announcements. We made all of the announcements in the newspapers. We heard right away that there was a memo put out that they weren't sure what the new government was going to bring. They would keep the Ohio people that were working in government informed. So we're not sure whether that was about us or whether that was about the loss of the municipal government. But we also know that just after that announcement, the next week after that, in the Cincinnati Police Department, at the first shift roll call, there was an announcement made to the patrol that the Ohio Assembly, that there are members, there were American state nationals in the area with the Ohio Assembly, and if they encountered their credential cards or any placards, they were to leave us alone. We would only cause them pain. That's a big statement. We also noticed that when we sent out all of our announcements and all of our, and we sent them either, depending, they were sent by either process serve. We process served the top people in their system, or we sent by registered mail, and or we sent priority mail, that none of the mail has been rejected. Prior to that, any notices we sent, we had only about a 60% actual delivery on those letters. Okay, so that's not bad, but it wasn't 100%. But since our government was publicly elected, 100% of our notices are being delivered to those offices, and 100% of them are, they could be throwing them in the trash without reading them, but they're not sending them back. So we know that we're having some effects. We've also sent one, at least one very important notice on immigration, because we were having a great deal of issue with immigration on our state. We were in support of the state legislature, who was also questioning the amount of immigrants that were being dumped into communities without infrastructure to handle them. And our concern was not only the people who were living there, but also the fact that the immigrants that were being dumped in there, or aliens, many of them didn't even meet the federal standards for immigration. They were criminal faction. They were uneducated and inappropriate, no skills to be dumped into the community. And many of the landlords, who in one particular case, one of the landlords was the mayor of the town, and he was canceling leases to put immigrants into his apartment housing, and he was charging the same amount of rent or higher rent for that apartment per room, not per apartment. And so we sent a very important immigration notice to the state legislature, to the governor, who used undesignated funds in Ohio to fund that immigration, which is absolutely not approved by the legislature. And we sent that in support of the legislature and let them know what the people of the Ohio Assembly thought or needed. So what we heard was, all of a sudden the next week, we heard that there was quite a few people who had left, and there was an easing of the situation and the tensions in that community. Maybe not entirely, but at least in some relief. So we know that those things are happening. And then when we sent our ex parte Milligan, which, unlike many of the assemblies, we did not put our ex parte Milligan out until we had a full Jural assembly, till our militia was had formed, and that we had some sheriffs on some counties, of course, our state coroner in place. And so we waited to put our ex parte Milligan out, and we sent that to our Supreme Court of Ohio, to the Supreme Court of the United States, to the to our district court representative on the Supreme Court of the United States, to every district court on Ohio, to each of the major departments of that enforce law on Ohio, as well as we sent that out then also with a welcome letter to every sheriff on Ohio, all 88 of them, and they all received our ex parte Milligan, as well as a letter explaining the hierarchy of authority within our assemblies in our state. So we've done some really important work clearing the way, for our sheriffs to be able to go out and go and talk and liaison to their counties of sheriffs, as well as cleared the way for our liaisons to be able to go out and be taken seriously on the state, by the state, under the state authority of the Ohio Assembly. So we haven't had a lot of direct interaction, but things have calmed down somewhat on Ohio. And we're getting ready to make some big pushes this year. And that's in our planning and within the planning of our International Business Assembly, as well as within the planning of our sheriffs and within our Jural Assembly. So we'll keep you posted how we do on that. But we are making progress, and we are starting to make some substantial inroads within our state. Okay. All right. So I see a comment about the Georgia Assembly, and I just want to comment that I know that the Georgia Assembly is working on getting their assembly back together. And I would say that if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and help, I think they're on a pretty good path, or at least we've talked, we've had some education, and I would have you open your mind and open your arms and go see what's going on and start to get involved. Again, if we're only sitting back, then we're letting somebody else do the work, and we're not necessarily participating in our assembly. And sometimes our job is to ask questions. Sometimes our job is to roll up our sleeves and do the research. And sometimes our job is to vote within our assembly, whether we like something or we don't like something. That's really where our power is all is in our vote, in our voice. So if you're not there exercising it, if you're not aware of the reconstituted Georgia Assembly, I'm going to say you need to go and find out what's going on in your assembly. And that's to everyone. Again, I'm encouraging, get involved, get your assemblies up and working. It is the only remedy you have to freedom. And if you don't do it, who is going to do it? And who's going to continue it in the future? Every gain that we're making with Global Family Group, with our banking, within our lawful processes, all of that can be lost in a generation or two. And we have to get involved, and we have to get each generation involved. And so, this is it's highly important that we all engage. Okay, you're here because you want to know. And you're here because you care. And the only way you're going to do that is within your assemblies. So Todd talks about, please elaborate on impartial review process. Is this a living court preliminary? So yes, so within our Jural Assembly, our whole point, Todd, is that we are trying to keep people out of court. We don't want to burden our courts down with minutia. We don't want to be like the other courts. We're not complaining. We're claiming on our courts. So that, what is a claim? A claim is something that happens to us that's harm or no harm, harm to property or harm to people. Okay? We're not there to settle disputes. We don't care if you don't like somebody. That's not what our courts are all about. That's what their courts are all about. It's all about controversy. And we're supposed to be settling those controversies in an adult way between ourselves. So our first phase in the preliminary to our court process is that you self-govern and you try to settle that issue. And you try to do that in a documented way. If you settle the issue, great. If you don't, you have the documentation, the mail that goes back and forth between you that says, hey, this person is being, basically a bonehead, right? They don't want to settle. They don't want to cooperate. They don't want to, but we also have to realize that we have that measure that we have to check ourselves too in what is it that we want. If we're out for just blood and money, that's never going to fly in our jurisdiction. Okay? Never. That's not what we are. That's not who we are. Okay? We want to be made whole, but we don't need to be anything more than whole necessarily. Okay? Depending on who it is, if it's man to man, woman to woman. So anyhow, within our court, self-governance is the first step within our court. We're trying to settle our issues ourselves. And if you reach impasse and nobody's going to listen, then you can go to the next step, which is taking them in our court to impartial review process. Or in some courts, they call it arbitration. Okay. So basically that is a 3-juror panel. And that 3-juror panel listens to both sides of the issue. And they may make suggestions on how to settle that. Each of those jurors may make independent suggestions on how to settle the issue. And they offer those solutions to the claimant and the accused. And so within that, there is discussion that goes back and forth between the claimant and the accused. Now, if somebody is being reasonable, they're going to listen to that because it's going to save them a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of headache, right? So within that impartial review, that can take several back and forths. It's not just once and done, settled. The impartial review committee, they may come back to, okay, we see a little bit more of this. Now we hear a little more detail. So what about modifying this just a little bit? And now you can reach here in your arbitration service, basically. Okay. So they're going to try that. There are going to be some people who are going to be unreasonable going through that process. Okay. And if they are, then they're going to go into living court. But once they go into living court, what they have to understand is that our trial by jury is a final decision. And whatever the jury decides is what they're going to end up doing. So if they want to be collaborative and cooperative, they're going to listen to the impartial review and settle it there. But if they don't, they're going to go into trial by jury. And they better have their facts and evidence straight, because that's what our jurors do, is they look at the facts and the evidence of the case and the testimony. And if they don't have their facts and evidence together, it's not going to be conditional. It will be, a unanimous decision of that living court. And, our courts are, is there harm? Is there no harm? What caused the harm? You're going to look at the who, what, why, when, where, and how of an issue. And once you answer all of those questions, it's pretty cut and dried. Okay. There isn't, oh, he was a poor boy from this, and that influenced his decisions. Nope. We are all self-governing. There isn't, well, he was on drugs. Okay. Well, guess what? He had a choice to take those or not take those. In our court, that's a fact. It's not a condition. And so, the process can be very cut and dried. Our form of law is actually fairly, compared to what goes on in the de facto, is draconian. It's a no-nonsense kind of discipline. And so we have to be, as jurors, we have to be willing to look only at those facts, the evidence, the law, if there's law that associates to it, and the witness testimonies. We have to have our, investigator hat on, because your jurors act as prosecutor and as juror. So they're going to ask the questions through their jury foreman, or whatever you want to call them, and they can also call for more investigation on something, in which case you'll have to continue your case at a different time to do the investigation. Maybe they need more information. Maybe they need records. Maybe they need pictures. Maybe they need, to go do a site visit for something. So there's a lot involved in that. And the impartial review process, hopefully, is the part where it keeps the shenanigans and the minutia out of our court, and teaches people how to get, to a collaborative type of agreement. Back in the 90s, there was a book, and I know it's still out and it's still published, called Win-Win. And that's what our impartial reviews are. And what we should be trying to establish is getting to win and win. How do you win and how do I win? How do we settle this amicably, right? So I hope that gives you a little better look at that process within our court. Okay. All right. So how does a county sheriff get elected if the county is not assembled yet? Well, so Karen, what's going to have to be is somebody who wants to raise their hand and be county sheriff. They may have to go out and start gathering their county together, right? And you've got to have at least 2 or 3 people to have a county sheriff, because you have to have the votes of those people for that candidate for county sheriff. Remember, our populations of our counties are at least 2, preferably 3. And if one of them wants to be sheriff, they just need the vote of at least 2 of those 3 people. Okay. So I would say, for example, on the Ohio Assembly, we have had issues in our past that, certain people shared rosters, which is why we don't make those addresses, those emails public. But there's you've got a coordinator on your assembly, and you could ask the coordinator to send out an email to the 3 people on your county. And I always say that, we always start gathering our counties by being willing to host somewhere. Maybe it's a Friday night pizza. Let's have a pizza. Let's sit and have a discussion. Let's meet each other, right? Or, a coffee clutch, maybe a Saturday morning. Maybe it's, whatever. But go through your coordinator and, see if the coordinator will send out an email to the people on the county and say, how about a get together? And then you can discuss about getting a county sheriff. Okay. So, we have to think about ways of reaching out outside of ourselves. Outreach is something each one of us should be doing anyhow. And sometimes that also means that you're going to do some in-reach. You're going to contact the people who are already within your county or within your assembly to start getting the ball rolling, right? So maybe it's a good thing to have your coordinator contact your county and say, what night is best for you to meet? Can we plan a meeting for this date and this time at this location, 4 weeks from now? And then have a email sent in between as a reminder. Maybe be the point contact. Provide your email so people can email you and contact you about getting together. But that's where you start in your counties. We all have to start with some face-to-face contact, or at least email-to-email contact, to get to know each other, to get to learn to trust each other, to build those relationships that are going to build our communities and then our counties, right? So that would be my suggestion to you, is to get that ball rolling and be a leader. County sheriff isn't just about law enforcement. It's about communication. The biggest part of a county sheriff's job is communication. They're going to be communicating not only between themselves, but they're going to be communicating to their de facto components. They're going to communicate to their ASNs. And sometimes they're going to communicate to the people on their county, their militias, their, as their county grows, to the other people on their county. So pick somebody that can communicate, or be someone that can communicate to get your message out on your county, right? Okay. All right. Please suggest a protocol for dealing with committee member absenteeism. Is it recommended to have a removal from the committee roster if people never show up and appear to be inactive? Well, Todd, that's one of the difficulties within the form of government that we are. It is frustrating. It's very frustrating when we are not consistent in our attendance, whether that's attendance at the General Assembly, attendance at the Jural assemblies, or attendance within the committees. And it leads to instability within the committees. Eventually, as your assembly grows and it begins to stabilize, people tend to stick. To the beginning, they're kind of trying things out and trying to decide where they best fit. And that process can go on for a while. But eventually your committees do have to say, I would think they would have to say that there's standing committee members, and then there are committee members at large. I don't know. I mean, Anna may not approve of that, because essentially what she says is that anyone can join a committee. Anyone can join your committee. But I would think that if your purposes are true and honorable, right? And we deal with a lot of honor and integrity. Those are founding principles in our assembly. That our committee members would be communicating within their committee members if they're going to need to be absent, or if they're no longer going to be on the committee, or if they're only coming to the committee for a particular issue, or if they're just monitoring that committee. We have a fully open and transparent government. So we can't hold people out. But, and it's not fair to the people who are doing the work. And it's not fair to all the people within our assemblies if we have people who come in and bomb our committees to try to change a decision or an issue without having been there for the body of the research, the work, the discussion, the debate, because all of that goes on in our committees. And so, you know, I think it's an issue that we need to talk maybe more about and talk with Anna about a little bit more to see how she would suggest, because it is, I hear it often among our assemblies, right? And, and it's not what I would consider good decorum for that to happen within our committees. So, you know, for right now, yes, you could remove somebody, or you can ask them, is it your intent to stay in this committee? Please respond yes or no. If no, we will remove you from the roster. Or you have 14 days to respond and you will be removed from the roster of the committee. Okay. So we, you know, there's a couple ways you can handle that until we finally get the issue decided one way or the other. Okay. Again, our committees aren't necessarily static. And we have new members coming in all the time. And my suggestion to you as a new member is, you know, listen for 3 to 6 months and join a committee. Listen at least 3 months, because you're just going to get your feet wet and begin to learn the business of your assembly and the protocols of your assembly, the personalities of your assembly. And then you're going to be able to dive in and choose, you know, what you are going to do in terms of helping your assembly stand, right? So I hope that helps, Todd. Okay. Penny on Arkansas. Any advice for those of us beginning to stand our county up? Is it true that we need 2 members on every one of our counties before our state can stand? So, no, your state stands by its state assembly. And all of us have historical counties that if we had to, we could enact our historical counties by vote of the people in that area. So, you know, your counties can be absorbed just like a state who's not doing their job and getting their state stood up and their assembly active can be absorbed by a state. Okay. So if we want to keep our states, we need to get our state assemblies working. If we want to get our counties, then, you know, eventually we're going to have to, you know, tell a county or vote as a county body to consolidate our counties. Some states have done that. I think Alaska's done that. I'm not certain if there's been, you know, consolidations on a couple of, but I think there's been a consolidation of counties on some other counties, and they've gone back to some of their original counties when they were chartered. So that's one way of looking at it. Okay. But, you know, their state can stand through its state assembly because it's tapping all the people of your state. And we're really tasked with standing that state assembly first. That's where our first point of authority is. And then we can flow that point of authority back to our counties. Okay. And that way, if you look at it this way, you have to realize that when you start at that state level, you're establishing sort of your state character and process. And then your counties have an easier time assembling because you've already done the hard work at the state, and you can replicate that then into your county assemblies. County assemblies are going to be a little bit different. And eventually, when we get done, Anna and I, with state assembly, we're going to start into working these same ideas and committees into county assemblies. So there'll be help a little bit later on. So right now, I would be getting your counties meeting, trying to get the relationships established, get to know the people, you know, get a basis for which you can begin to really do business on, you know, have that ability to gather people together and assemble. That's your first order of business, is to assemble. Okay. All right. All right. So, what are some lessons learned that stand out to you in your journey to seatment? Thank you for being available for questions. Your time is much appreciated, Lisa. So, lessons learned. So, I would say that the lessons learned is, first of all, coordinators have no power. They're there as a liaison between your assembly and the Federation. They're there to help guide you. They're there to bring back learning. But they're not there to be CEO. They're not there to lord over your assemblies. Okay. I know in some assemblies, the coordinators have a death grip and they need to let go because the development of your assembly will be somewhat organic. And it's going to grow by being inclusionary, not exclusionary. So there are some states where the coordinators won't allow people in, but our assemblies are for all the people on our state. We cannot vet people into our assemblies. We cannot hold them out of our assemblies. And so that's a first lesson that Ohio had to learn, is that the people, who's in charge, right? We had to ask that question repeatedly. Who's in charge? And everybody should be raising their hand because they're there. But also realize that who's in charge means you have responsibility. You have responsibility to do the work. You have responsibilities to populate the committees. You have responsibility to learn the material and start to get your assemblies active. Okay? That's probably lesson number one. Lesson number two is committee chairs have no power. None. They're only there to help organize the committee, to get the meeting times and dates together, maybe to assemble an agenda, to be able to go back and ask for any kind of advice or issues that they may have, and to be able to get that information back to the committees. They can't change a committee decision. They can say that they don't agree with the committee decision, but they can't change the committee decision. And they present the committee's decision, whether they like it or not. Okay? So the second thing is to remember, again, who's in charge? The people are. The people on the committee. And the chairs don't actually vote. They are the tiebreaker vote. Okay? That's the only time a chair actually votes in a committee, is if there needs to be a tie broken. Okay? Now, they can have opinion because they're a member of the committee, but their opinion isn't the only one that counts. Their opinion has to be placed into the puzzle of information that we're all trying to figure out when it comes to issues. Okay? So, chairmen have no power. All the power lies in you, the people, and in your vote. So sometimes it comes down to, all right, fine, we're going to vote on it, because that's where your power is. If you don't like it, quit arguing, vote against it. Okay? So that's some of the, and it brings peace. That way of doing things in our assembly is the way we're supposed to do it, and it brings peace. And we have to realize as members, sometimes we're going to win and sometimes we're going to lose on an issue. But it doesn't mean in the future that issue might not come back again, and then we have an opportunity to adjust it. None of our documents are static. None of our votes necessarily are a forever vote. Okay? An issue can come back up for we've had to change course on our assemblies several times, all of us. Anna, as she as she gets aware of some information, has to change course on that information. Which is why, I always encourage people to, when you're researching, realize where a document is in its history. It's there. But as history has evolved and information has become more available, sometimes we have to take the newer information and course correct. We are always going to be correcting our course. The one consistent thing that is going to happen in our assemblies is change. We're going to keep changing for about 10 years, maybe longer. And then even then, we're going to evolve. So we have to realize that we have to make the best decisions that we can. We have to make that for all the people on our state, which takes integrity and ethics and honor. And it takes a lot of hard work, a great deal of hard work. And we have to be willing to participate in that hard work. So roll up your sleeves, get out your lawnmowers, mow your own lawn, right? Get active in your assembly, get active in your committees. And even if you don't know something about a committee and it's not populated, go populate it, go learn it. The only way we become experts is by learning, right? We get out and we research and we look, we write, we listen, we learn. So the next lesson, I would say the next big lesson our assembly learned was in doing our mock trials, was our jury needed more education. They were not used to being prosecutors. They were not used to ferreting out details, to listening to testimonies, to discern the truth, what is really true, not just what that person's truth is or that person's truth is. They have to discern what is true. And it's a big job for the jury. They have to listen intently. They have to be having their thinking caps on the whole time. And so jury education is highly important, because when you're a juror, somebody's life may be in your hands, and you've got to be able to have that spirit of discernment to listen and look for the information that you need to know and be able to ask the questions that may someday save someone's life or may take that life. And so we have to be willing to be serious about it. It's not a club. It's not an organization. It's a government. And we have to be serious about that. Okay. I think the last lesson is it is a business. Our governments are business, and we have to treat it like business. We're not going to sit in a business and scream and shout and call each other names. In a business, we're expected to have a certain decorum. In our assemblies, we have to have the language of diplomats. We have to be able to ask those questions. We have to probe those facts. And we have to do it in a manner that is honorable, not accusatory. Okay? Because we're all there for the same reason. We all have a common goal: to get our assemblies up, to claim our freedom, to claim our power and our position as a voter, right? And so we have to begin to take that emotion and set it off to the side and begin to listen to each other for the value that they bring and ask questions, not accuse. And so with that, we're exercising our vote and our power, okay? And we're exercising the very foundational principles that are at the base of our pillar, our standing assemblies, of ethics and integrity, mutual respect, and honor. We have to self-govern in those ways. If you're getting upset, you're starting to shout, stop. Okay? So those are some of the lessons we learned on the Ohio Assembly. We have to work together to accomplish what we need to accomplish. And we have to be willing and collaborative and work together sometimes as a whole, sometimes in committees, and sometimes We're going to have to work on our own and bring that forward all on our own. Okay. So, all right, that's my soapbox. All right, Lisa, dear Lisa, does Ohio have a guidebook on how to move a business into the private? Thanks very much. Well, Joe, I've got a body of research that I've done, and it's actually fairly easy. So if you've got an LLC, you've got to determine who your customers are. If you have customers that are federal government or what was the municipal government, we're not really sure how to address that quite yet. But if you've got customers, then you're probably going to have to retain your LLC because they only do business with LLCs or S corps or C corps. And that's as much for their and that's much for their protection. Okay. But when it comes down to deciding what your business is, whether it needs licenses or it needs to have that LLC to do business with the state, then if it doesn't, then basically what you need to do is work with your customers to make sure that if you unincorporate, they're still going to be able to use your service, right? What do they require? And that's something you're going to have to explore. That's kind of the first part of researching how to bring your business on the private. The other thing you have to do is you have to look at essentially what the risks of your business are. Are there risks? Do you have substantial risk? Because an LLC, the purpose of an LLC for the state was to separate your personal liability from your corporate liability. All right. So there's only really two things that they do when they get you to register your business. The only two benefits they have is that they're going to separate your liability so somebody can't reach back and take your house. Okay. And the second thing is that they protect the name of your business so someone else can't have the same name and cause confusion in the marketplace. They protect that name for which you give them a part of your business. You're registering. So now they have a vested interest in your business for which they demand taxes on your profits. Right? And that's really what it is. That is exactly what it is. Okay? So you have to determine what your risk or your liabilities are. And you have to plan, because when you come into the unincorporated, it's just Dear Joe, right? So that means you're either going to have to go seek an indemnity bond or a surety bond, a performance bond, or you're going to have to raise a personal liability, umbrella liability policy to cover whatever liability you may incur in that way. Okay, whether that's with an employee or whether that's with the business that you do or the product you sell or provide. So you have to take a look at all of that. That's important. Okay. And once you discern that, and you might have to have a talk with an insurance agent or a financial person that can write those indemnity bonds and surety bonds and see what that's going to be. My other suggestion would be to make sure you have really, if you've got employees and it's not just you, to have really good employee handbooks and practices. Okay. Because remember, those employees may not be ASNs, they may be ASCs. And who has the responsibility for protecting them? The other side, right? So as you think about that, that begins your research right there. Once you determine some of those things and you get some of those things done, okay, if you don't have employees, it's pretty simple. If you don't have a lot of liability, you don't have a physical location where you have to raise a little bit of your insurance to take care of somebody falling in your business or falling in your parking lot, then you go to the state and you apply for the dissolution of your LLC. And once you get that dissolution paper, then you file a final tax return on the business. That cuts you free and clear of whatever it is, whatever that liability is. Because up until that point, remember, they're your partner in that business. So once you do that final tax return and you do the dissolution of your business, then basically you can continue that business in the private. Now, what I would do is immediately or before that, I would take whatever logo or whatever, I would maybe change my logo so that the state doesn't have, an interest in that. And I would take my name and take the LLC off of it, and I would copyright that. So how do you do that? So you're going to take and you're going to print that on a nice white sheet of paper. You're going to stick it in a nice flat brown envelope, 2 of them, actually. You're going to duplicate it in each envelope. You're going to take that envelope, you're going to address it to yourself or to your business, and you're going to send both envelopes to yourself using real postage stamps with a hand cancellation on it. That hand cancellation at the post office has a date and a time. You want to make sure that they cancel it so that there is a date and a time on the envelopes. And when you receive those envelopes, then you open one and you scan and photograph the envelope, especially with the date and time stamp on it, the cancellation, and the content of the envelope. And then you have it published, okay, to your personal account. And you do that to your vendor account if there's a place to do that for your documents. That's the way it is. And from there, you're off and flying on your own. Okay? So I hope that helps. And then you may also want to do a business deed of reconveyance if it was a business that you've moved from the public to the private, and update your certificate of assumed names to include your private business. And that's really the process. Okay. All right. I can take that down. And so Todd on Washington, have any of the efforts included addressing? We've actually noticed our state legislature and sent a directive to them. Right now, we're trying to secure in our International Business Assembly first business. So we're trying to take care of some of the hot issues first, the issues that directly affect our ASNs. And then we're going to start concentrating and breaking out into those various different issues that are on our states. So, your state has, your assembly has the ability to send a directive to the legislature. They include that with the public comment. Okay. But again, your force of standing really is important in getting your assembly fully standing and publicly elected. That's where the real force of your effect on your state legislature is going to be. Okay. Suddenly they're not just dealing with Todd on King County or whatever. They're now dealing with the sovereign body of citizens on their state and their state assembly, their organic state assembly. So yeah, you can make public comment. You can send directives and notices, right? Are they going to listen? Maybe. But once you stand, they're going to listen to you a whole lot more, right? Once you're elected, publicly elected and fully standing. So my comment to all the assemblies that are spending their time writing notices is get your assembly standing, then get your notices written. You can plan those. You can get them in draft form so that, you know, when you've got your assembly standing, you just shotgun those things off. That's great. But I wouldn't waste a whole lot of my efforts and time doing that over getting my committees and my assembly standing. Okay. Leanne Vitalis, Minnesota needs active ASNs, ASCs. Do you have a simple presentation that we could use for outreach when presenting to a small groups of interested people? Well, yeah, I've got some simple presentations that we've developed on Ohio. Leanne, if you send me an email, I'll be happy to share a couple of those. They're pretty simple, you know, but one of the most effective things that I've found for people is to give a presentation on the Declaration of the Unanimous Declaration of Independence. Most of them have never read it. They don't know. And then you can relate it to exactly what is happening in your government, in their government today. And then you can tell them what our government is doing about it. And that has been, for me, that has been one of my single most, and I do it just by reading the Declaration of Independence and discussing, you know, when I get to certain parts is, does that sound familiar about our grievances about the government today? Is that the way you want your government to act? Put it on them. When you engage them and you challenge, and they're there because they already are dissatisfied. But when you bring that full round to exactly in their own backyard, they listen a whole lot more. So think about that, and think about, you know, what you can do directly for, you know, those types of presentations. Okay. All right. All right. Does your ombuds office assist is impartial review? So your ombudsman is the one who he's going to try. You can go to the ombudsman. That's the one that tries to help you hear each other. That's the job of the ombuds. They're there to say, listen to one. Okay, you're the claimant, you start. What are your issues? And oh, by the way, accused, you listen. And when you're done, then you can the ombuds can turn to that person and say, what did you hear? And they want to start up. No, I'm not interested in your experience right at this moment. What did you hear? Okay. Now the other person is hearing what they said. That person is assimilating what they said. Then the ombudsman will say, okay, when you're done, then now you tell your side of the issues. And he's going to ask the claimant, what did you hear? Because often our issues are communication. We either haven't communicated it clearly or we're not willing to listen to what's being said. That's often our issue, right? We've already formed our opinions before we've listened to the full story. So the ombudsman's there to do that kind of back and forth. Now, the ombudsman's going to document that. He's going to have documentation which goes into, you know, basically your self-governance stage and then into the impartial review. And he can be there to testify, but he's not there to make any decisions. That's 3 jurors, or to guide anything other than his testimony and the experience of being the ombuds. Okay. So if you can't settle it at the ombuds, you're going into self-governance. If you can't settle it in self-governance, you're going to the impartial review or arbitration phase. And if you can't settle it there, it goes into a trial by jury. That's really what it is. So if you're being dragged into the ombuds, it's serious. That can be used as evidence against your case. You know, if you're crying and whining at the ombudsman office and not willing to collaborate or listen, then that's going to be noted. Okay. So, you know, our ombudsman has a difficult position. I admire our ombuds a lot. And he has to have a little bit of the wisdom of Solomon and the patience of Job, because our people are so indoctrinated to complain, but not claim. They're so indoctrinated to what they want, to the me, my, I, than what's, you know, listening to someone else's issues and trying to comprehend information. And so it really, you know, that's what the job of the ombuds really does. Okay. But realize it takes formal documentation too. And that formal documentation can be used in your favor or against your favor. Okay. All right. I hope that answers. All right. Can county jural positions all be ASNs? So if it is an elected office, Tim, they have to be an American state citizen. Okay. So what positions are American state citizens? Obviously, your justice or justice of the peace on the county. The court clerk has to be an elected position. Any of your sheriffs have to be an elected position. Your coroners are elected positions. And the chairman of each committee and the chairman of your jural assembly has to be state citizen. Okay. The other positions, depending on your assembly, might be elected, or they might be publicly elected, or they may be internally elected. In which case, if they're internally elected and they're not a public office or a chairman on a committee, then they can be ASN. So a bondsman could possibly be ASN. A court recorder could be ASN. A court recorder can also be hired as a third party, because frequently there are court recorders out there for hire. Okay. They're kind of a service. You know, so, you know, a jural assembly secretary, you know, it can be an ASN. Trying to think what else if they're positions. So really, they're only your public elected officials and the chairman of your jural assembly or the chair of a committee. Everything else on your jural assembly can be, you know, elected internally, or affirmed from internally, appointed from internally. So, you know, realize that there's plenty of jobs to do. You know, the court recorder or the court clerk can then appoint other court clerks, but they're the responsible party for their court clerks. So eventually he or she is not a one-man show. They have to have help. They have to have other clerks to do the work, possibly. So realize that's, you know, that's kind of, you know, up to each assembly to decide how they're going to do that and what positions they're going to make publicly elected or internally elected. So what I will tell you though is if they're publicly elected, then if something happens and that person shows that they're incapable of doing the work, or they've pulled shenanigans, then it either requires a very public resignation, or it takes a recall vote of the assembly for public positions. And you have to stage a public recall vote, which is as expensive in many ways as doing a public election. You have to go through the same process as a public election. All the notice, all the election issue, notices and things in the papers, and then all of the election results as well. So you got to think about that too in what you're doing. Okay. All right. All right. Will you speak to the launch of AFD? Well, I don't know a whole lot about it. I probably know as much, maybe as many of you. So realize that the process that is being gone through, there are many, many steps in order to get to the brick and mortars on our states. When Anna announces that they've got prosperity unions open, what she means is in the computer program, they've set up those prosperity unions in the computer program. But there may be more steps. We don't know. I don't get those communications. But what I do know about it is the state to state, there has to be state to state connections. There has to be state to AFD connections. There has to be AFD to what they call the exchange or settlement bank, St. Crown, so that it can connect then and pass through and exchange to whatever currency is that we're required to have, whether that's USD or AFD, or maybe we're going on vacation and we need pesos, or we need some form, Great British Pound or Deutsche Marks or whatever that might be. Okay. So all of these avenues of connectivity take additional programming, and it takes additional time. Okay. So as they're going through this whole process, I'm sure that the one thing that they're keeping in mind as they go through it is they're messing with people's money, right? And the one thing that can get you in hotter water than anything you've ever been in is making a mistake with people's money, right? No intent in it, even just making the simple mistake. So, we want to make sure that when it's done and it's going to work, and it's going to work correctly, right? Because, might know you, Abby, might not know you, Abby, but I don't want you having my money and you don't want me having yours, right? So we don't want to have those kind of mistakes occur. And we want to make sure that it's done correctly so that our prosperity is preserved and moves on. So, realize that it's tremendous. It is a tremendous task. I only have some experience in terms of accounting database and accounting database functions, and a little bit with connection and transfer in and out of banks and credit unions. But I know that those connections, back when they first started doing basically like direct deposit, those took months to work the bugs out of. And trust me, there were bugs. So, we want to make sure that those things are working correctly right off the bat. So, it's gonna, our AFD is currency. We have to think of it as currency flowing. It's got to flow through a system, and it's going to flow through many avenues to get to where it's going. So, we want to make sure that that flow is smooth. and that there are no mistakes. There's no roadblocks in that whatsoever. So yeah, it's coming. And we just have to practice perseverance. I always tell everybody, you want to practice perseverance, not patience, because patience will be tested, right? We have to keep doing what we're doing. We have to keep working. We have to keep making plans towards our banking and our banks, and being ready for when they say, okay, let's open a brick and mortar. Let's produce prosperity cards. Let's get everybody up and rolling. And let's get this open so that we can relieve the people. We're ready, right? So get your planning done. And, we ourselves, Anna has said, we need to start thinking about what we're going to do for our homes, our properties, our families, our personal transportations, whatever our needs are. We need to address our needs, address the needs of our immediate family, if there are some, and then think about our community. What are we going to do with that? It's a lot of money. Most of us have never, ever handled that much money. Okay. And so we have to begin to dream about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. And maybe in some ways, who we're going to use to do that with. Maybe we've got repairs we need to make. And we want to put that towards maybe an ASN on our assembly, that it needs work, that can do the work, that's qualified to do the work, right? So again, we're tasked with that type of research and those kinds of work and ability to do that. So I hope that helps. Launch of AFD. I hope everybody understands exchange banking, because it's just like going on a vacation. And if you've ever been out of the country and had to exchange money, there's a ratio, there's a formula, right? So today, the AFD is over 2,900, or gold is over 2,900 an ounce. So whatever that is, $2,940 at one point. Well, that makes our AFD worth $294 each AFD to each USD. So we have to spend some time calculating that. So if you want to know what that is, just take 294 and take it times 5,000. And that's what we get in our account based on today's AFD. It's a real simple calculation. Couldn't have made it any easier at 1/10 of an ounce of gold. So I always tell everybody, drop the zero, move the decimal over to the left one place, and you'll see exactly what AFD is worth. Okay. So hang in there. Keep trying to keep your head above water. And, I know that with some of the announcements in the revelation of St. Crown, it's getting closer and closer and closer. So I'm hoping we're going to see that very soon. Okay. On the Ohio Assembly, we kind of have a saying, Christmas is coming. It's coming. I don't think we'll have to wait till Christmas this year, but it's coming. And so it will be a great day when we do have that ability to relieve everybody's debts and be truly sovereign and free with our own money. Should we be having a committee meetings more than once a month? You're doing a great job answering everyone. Thank you. I appreciate that. Well, it really depends on the committee, because some of our committees don't need to necessarily meet more than once. And, if our committees are meeting and people are doing their research, right, their homework. I'm an ex-teacher as well as an ex-businesswoman. And so I refer back and forth, but you got to do your homework, right? So a committee can meet once if everybody's doing homework, if they're doing the research, if they're doing some preliminary writing, some drafting. They don't have to get together more than once a month. Some committees choose to get together once a week. Some committees say, okay, I'm going to have a subcommittee, a drafting committee, a research committee. And you can do that too, and let the subcommittees work on an off week, right? So it's really up to you and what your needs are, and the people that you have on your committee. And I would encourage you to try to start that type of activity. Keep people engaged, keep them working, keep them learning, keep them, contributing in the lifeblood of your assembly. Okay, so really up to you, but there's some good ideas on how to keep things working and go forward. Okay. All right, let's see. Can you speak to Ohio parameters for purchasing your brick and mortar Prosperity Bank? So, the only thing I know is I was told that our first Prosperity Banks will be funded. Okay. So, and I asked the question, okay, well, if people are the only ones to own property, how does that happen through our assembly then, being an unincorporated business, right? An unincorporated government. And the question came back to me from Anna is, who is the assembly? And of course, the answer is people. So our assemblies will be allowed to own our banks. And then we have to think about, like I said earlier, the logistics of all of that. The who, the what, the when, the where, and the whys. Okay? Because they're going to take care of the how. They're going to help us fund those banks. But also realize that they're going to make sure they're going to have, in the launching of our state banks, they're going to have the last say in whether or not a building is going to meet security or purpose. So that's why it's important we have to do that work to research it. And we have to make the case, basically a prospectus on why that bank is going to serve our needs, how that bank is going to serve our needs, and where it's located and how that speaks to the purpose of our facility. Okay, so we have to do that research. We have to get those ducks in a row and realize, what we're going to do. I think the next big question is, how are we going to pay for the people who are going to man that bank? And our banks have to think about that, because they are due. A man is worth his labor, right? And we're not always going to be volunteers. So what do? Do we have an account fee, a monthly account fee? Maybe that's one AFD. Maybe that's one AFD a quarter. Maybe it's one AFD every 6 months. Maybe it's one AFD a year. Maybe there's a service fee for in its ins and outs. And think about carriage and accounting being just like your checkbook. It's about it. You have a balance, and there's an in and there's an out. Simply that. Okay. So that's yet to be, I think, and that hopefully they'll have that in their training, exactly what we will and won't do. We will not be charging usury. You will not be receiving usury, meaning interest. So we're not charging interest, and we're not going to be giving you interest on your deposits. So, realize that as well too in the mix of things. So there's still a lot of questions to be answered in banking and in the business of banking. And that's really all I know about it. Okay. I wish I knew more, but if I did, that would mean that we're getting really close to opening banks and we've received training, right? Okay, let's see here. Let's see here. All right. There's another question. Does your ombuds office keep a record? Does it get passed on to the living court if the case gets to that point? Yes, it can be. And I think I answered that earlier. So, that's, so yeah, there are no shenanigans. You're not going to be pulling the wool over anybody's eyes. So realize that we have to quit complaining. We just have to. And we have to begin to self-govern ourselves in those ways. We have to leave those de facto ways behind. Okay. All right. Are the ombudsmen vetted or voted in? Well, they're both vetted, but it's up to the assembly as to whether or not the ombudsman is internally elected or publicly elected. Okay. So that's really up to each assembly to decide. And so every elected position, even your committee chairs, need to be vetted. Is that person appropriate? What is their mindset and their character? What's their intent in chairing the committee? And so every elected position is vetted, right? You just have to decide if that ombudsman is going to be publicly elected or privately elected. And that's a discussion on your assembly. Okay. What are you doing about enforcement in Ohio now that you're seated? So are you talking law enforcement, or are you talking enforcement from the assembly? So we enforce from the assembly by directive and notice. And then, if need be, if we have to do more than that, then we have to take that into our Jural assembly. And that's where our marshal at arms and our militia commander or militia, our marshal at arms, that's where they go into action. They're going to be communicating with them, right? And then on the counties, it's going to be the county sheriffs. So right now we have four counties that have elected sheriff out of our 88. I believe we have 4 or 6 more in training on different counties. So we're starting to put those things into place. Like I said, it's continuing to develop, and that and so you're going to continue that process as you get people and your counties are populated. Okay. All right. When our ASNs and ASCs vote, do their individual votes have to be disclosed publicly? And if so, how do you prevent potential retaliation? Well, Susan, I'll take the first part of that question and say everything we do is public. Everything. So our votes can be disclosed. On the Ohio Assembly, a lot of times we vote in the chat of our Zoom meetings when we do it. And if somebody doesn't want their vote right out on the chat, then we allow them to message that into our marshal at arms. But if there's any question in the vote, it becomes public. Okay. And the other part of that is prevent potential retaliation. Well, anybody that's willing to retaliate against you for a vote is not suited in our assemblies. They need to go back to a district assembly. We don't attack each other. That's not what we're about. And our vote is our sacred duty, period. Okay? If somebody attacks you over a vote, I would hope you would drag them into the ombuds office, and if need be, drag them into court. Okay? Or into oversight. One of the two. So, our vote is our sacred duty. And we should never be afraid. We carry that fear with us from the de facto. And And we have to be willing to, just basically tell somebody to go pound salt, if that's what it is. And you know, we don't want our mouths to run lukewarm. It's yes or it's no. And when somebody attacks you, it's their problem. It's not your problem. It's their problem. And if they push that, it becomes everybody's problem, and everybody else will help take care of that too. So realize that when we assemble, we have to be willing to stand up for our brothers and sisters. We have to self-govern. We have to stand where we are. We have to make our yes be our yes and our no be our no. If somebody doesn't like it, too bad, right? Go pound salt. You'll get further. All right. So potential retaliation can be handled through the Marshal at Arms office or the Ombudsman's office. Plain and simple. And if that person is out of line, the Marshal at Arms is supposed to then enact some type of possible timeout for them. Okay. If it escalates to a physical advance, then your Marshal at Arms, your coroner, or your county sheriff is going to take care of that too. Okay. So take heart. Don't be afraid. Stand where you are. Okay. All right. So please verify for Kentucky that you don't vote a coordinator out, that Anna hires and fires them. The state assemblies don't have that power. Well, Laura, that's kind of a loaded question. And I think what you have to do is you have to decide whether or not the coordinator is doing the will of the people. Because if they're not doing the will of the people, if they're not doing their job in coordinating your assembly, providing the resources, setting up meetings to begin with, if they're not attending or doing the things that they need to be doing, the assembly can make a vote of non-confidence and send that on to Anna. If there's issues, with a coordinator, that you would hope that coordinator would have enough honor and integrity to say, well, what is the problem? What can I fix? How do I fix it? What do you recommend? Do I need additional coordinators? We need to work together as coordinators. So yes, Anna does hire and fire them, but your assemblies can send a vote of non-confidence to Anna with a list of grievances, and then Anna can review that with the coordinator. And if she finds that they're out of line, she can fire them, or she can add more coordinators. And if there are other coordinators that are stepping up, those coordinators as a group can outvote a coordinator. But they better be doing the will of the people, and they better be not, acting in self-interest. And they better be doing it according to what the blueprint and the plan is. Okay, because they take a great risk in that. And and Anna can fire them too. And it restarts your assemblies. So know that our processes need to be cooperative between our coordinators and our people, our coordinators and our citizens. And a coordinator is an international employee on your state. So it really, really takes the vote of your state citizens to have a vote of non-confidence. But if something's going on that is then you have to be able to sit down and listen, and maybe your ombudsmans can get involved in that and try to help the coordinator figure out what it is that's going wrong. Okay. Again, coordinators are not the be all end all. They're there as the vehicle between us and the Federation. So if we're trying to hold on to power, we're trying to push an agenda, trying to push an issue, on the people, or stopping an issue or stopping progress, then those are serious issues for our assemblies. Okay. So no, the state can't vote them out, but they can certainly put a vote of non-confidence the citizens into ANA. And then that can become, a point of discussion with ANA. So, my advice is get your ombudsman or engage an ombudsman, and then, try to iron out your issues and find out what it is that's either deficient, or try to find out, what do you really need to do to advance your assembly. Like I said, we're all here for the same reason, or should be. And so we need to be able to advance that on forward, and assist them, not fight them. Okay? No fights. Our power's in our vote. Can the Jural Assembly Coordinator also be chairman of the Jural Assembly? That's not really advised. When you're ready to transition to a chairman, that necessarily is not, they either have to make up their mind whether they're going to be coordinator or chairman. And if you're ready and at that point, then maybe you don't need a coordinator on the Jural Assembly anymore. Maybe you just need a chairman. So, so that coordinator would step down as coordinator of the Jural Assembly, become chairman of the Jural Assembly. So in our assemblies, and again, each of our assemblies have an organizational component, our committees, and they have an operational component. For example, in the Jural Assembly, it's our court. They're actually two, in some ways, separate things, but they work together. The Jural Assembly makes the plans, puts the things together, is in the background working, and sends that to, when it's appropriate, the Jural Assembly. They oversee the General Assembly. They provide the jury pool to the General Assembly. They provide the court venue for for the court to operate in. The jury pool sends the jurors that go into the court. The oversight committee watches over the process of the court. And the education part of it is always constantly educating in the background to support that court. Okay. So, so if you're at that point where you don't need a coordinator anymore, then you can be chairman, but that's only chairman over the committees. The court actually operates, and I'll be the first to tell you, our court clerk pretty much operates our court. Okay. He's the operational kind of point of contact. As in most, even in the de facto, the court clerks pretty much run the courts. Now, they defer a lot of times to the judge or the magistrate, but not in our court. Okay. It's pretty much the court clerk. Okay. So that's going to be something that you're going to have to discern, whether or not it's time to just have a chairman of the Jural Assembly, or if you need a coordinator and a chairman of the Jural Assembly. Okay. All right. I saw the credential cards listed as a service on the Global Family Bank website. So, yes, I don't know that they have them out already yet. I know that they were working on that, but understand, okay, so this is where state authority comes in. Now, they might list your state, but what happens when your state stands? Think into the future. Is your state going to recognize 3 or 4 different types of credential cards? Probably not. They're going to want one credential card. They're going to want to be able to identify one official assembly credential card. Global Family Bank might be great in the future for international, international travel, because it's really meant for international. Our state credential cards are based on the authority of our states. And eventually, every state could have their own official credential card recognized by their state estate. And maybe that credential card stands in place of your driver's license or a state ID. Okay? Done correctly, it might eventually be recognized across all the states of states. Then you can travel with it easily. So, exciting, yes, but we've seen some issues. There are things that need to be cleaned up in terms of that. And then we also have to remember that the authority really lies in our states. That's your nation. They're the ones that have the authority. And so think about that. And think about, starting to talk about that on your assembly, what you will do when you stand. Are you going to have an official credential card? Is it going to be your state's character? Okay. Because eventually you're going to want to have your own placard too for all of your conveyances. What do I mean by conveyance? All the little cars and trucks and golf carts and boats and motorcycles and whatever that we drive on, that we travel in and on. And we want to identify our jurisdiction from theirs. Are they going to accept, 5 or 10 different ones on the state? Nope. They're probably going to only accept one. And that's an issue all of our state assemblies are going to have to grapple with. Okay. So, if you really need one, then, you're free to do that. But I would be making contact with my state assembly and making sure I have my state assembly's credential card as well. Okay. All right. Is Ricardo Johansson's work a good way to get new people introduced to the Republican form of government? Anna acknowledges him in Article 1709. His book is Emergence from the Illusion. I've not read that book, and I'm not familiar enough with him, Pete, to be able to endorse that one way or another. So I'll have to do a little research on that. And, and I think when it comes to, the Republican form of government, we all have a lot of study to do. Remember, our Republican form of government is direct voting and direct participation. And those two things are really the hallmarks of our Republican form of government. So thank you for bringing that to my attention, but I really don't know and have enough information, and I will write it down and go take a look at it. Thank you. Okay, we are allowed to post Anna's article on social media for educational purposes. Sorry, off topic. Well, Lisa, I take Anna's articles often and I post them on Facebook. We just have to remember to credit the articles. Now, sometimes I find Facebook will shadow ban them, or they won't put them up. So sometimes I just copy the body of the article, and then in the comments, I'll comment, yeah, this is what Anna wrote. This is under article such and such, so-and-so. So it's not right on the post, right? And so there's tricky ways of crediting it and getting around it, and then giving comment to where to giving comment and credit to where it's due. Okay. So the more we can get information out, especially certain articles that really help bolster our position on social media, I think it's a great way of getting people aware. And then maybe, educating them to the point where they want to ask more questions or make us aware of what their desire in terms of their status is. They'll ask those questions. So, yeah, good question. Okay. Lisa, will you comment on the name of St. Crown Bank? St. Crown Industrial Loan Company Bank, the worst bank name in history of bank names. Amy, you're putting me on the spot here. So I really don't know much about them. I see that. I see that they're unincorporated. I know that they have connectivity in terms of exchange, and that's what we really need. You know, maybe it's the worst bank name in history. I don't know. You'll have to take a poll and a vote on that one yourself. But you know, if it gets the job done and it's in our and it's in an unincorporated form and access to exchanging our AFD, I don't care if they call it peanut butter sandwiches, right? So I'll leave that right there. Thanks. Okay. You guys have got a lot of questions today. All right. So explain the relationship roles between ombudsman and oversight. Well, the ombudsman eventually kind of watches over the oversight committee. He can have input into it on certain issues if he's aware of them. He can send testimony to the oversight committee. But in terms of that, I don't know that he necessarily has any other relationship with it other than, you know, his experience within the ombudsman's office, trying to settle the issues and or bring out issues and or bring those issues if he suspects he has a duty to. You know, that's one of the things in our jurisdiction. Each one of us has a duty. We can't stick our head in the sand and say, well, I'm not going to be the one to be the tattletale. We have a duty. And sometimes it's a very uncomfortable duty. But we also have to be brave enough and leave the fear behind to go ahead and pick up our duty and do that in our jurisdiction. You know, if we stick our head in the sand, what happens the next time, right? Or the next time, because there will be a next time. And that's what's happened in the slippery slope of the other jurisdiction, you know? So, you know that we do have a duty and an honor to bring those things forward. So the ombudsman has that same duty, that if he discovers anything that's really off, he has a duty to bring that to the oversight committee. You know, it goes back to don't let your mouth run hot or cold or lukewarm. It's got to run hot or it's got to run cold. It's got to be a yes. It's got to be a no. Okay. All right. All right. Continue on here. And I think that's the end of the questions. So you all did a great job today asking questions. I really appreciate it in Anna's absence. I hope this was helpful to you. And know that the Ohio Assembly is willing to assist any of the assemblies, you know, in terms of doing a presentation, helping you get your feet planted on the ground, you know, doing the presentations. I know going to be on Arkansas real soon. And I've got a couple others that are scheduled. So, you know, get active in your assemblies. That's going to help you with your questions and your information levels and really exercising your power of your vote and your Republican form of government. Okay. I also want to announce that our, again, I want to remind anybody, I did send an email out to those that have already booked for our American States Family Reunion. The date had to be changed because they changed the historical weekend. that we were basing everything around. It's really a great place to go and a great place to have a little entertainment. We're planning some seminars. We're asking for anybody that would like to make presentations to contact us. We'll be asking for presenters. And we're going to want to know, because we're going to hopefully have research done so that by March we can open hotel reservations. Hotels are limited, and so they're going to go very quickly. So if you're thinking about taking a vacation and coming to Ohio to our American States Assembly, it's a great vacation place as well for families. Lots of things to do on the island. And we'll have lots of activities planned as well. So we're still working on details of the events. And so, we're going to try to make it as best we can and do the best we can in costs. Realize that, Put-in-Bay is a little more of an expensive place to go. They're only open basically 4 months out of the year. So they have to make up 12 months and 4 months. So, but I don't think it'll be, if you're planning now, terribly important or terribly difficult, and especially if we have our AFD by then, right? So don't be left out in the cold. If you book now, there's not a commitment until we start working on hotels. So you can go to eventbookings.com and look up the American State Assembly's Family Reunion 2025. Okay. September 3rd through the 8th. All right, everybody, make Tuesday excellent. Go get involved. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.